Good morning, everybody. Here we are, we're live, and it's all happening. CliffCentral.com on a Tuesday morning. Mbulelo's here. I am here, and if you have noticed, there's someone else here with us this morning, too. His name is Wade. And Wade actually sent me an email the other day, which was pretty damn cool. So I decided, no time like the present. I'm going to waste a single second. Let's get him on the show. And there's Simpiwe in the background. She just walked past Mbulelo. Wave, Simpiwe. There she is.
You should wave, Simpiwe. We got some purple hair going here, by the way.
Yeah, she's got purple hair, and she's definitely this. Hey. There she is. Good morning. All right. Well, we'll introduce you to Wade properly in a second. Hopefully. Oh, hang on. Apparently, we weren't. For some reason, we weren't coming through on the app. Hopefully, we're back now. Okay, we're on. Good stuff. All right, so here we are on a Tuesday, and things are happening. Let me get straight to our guest and introduce you to Wade. He sent me an email the other day and said that he has started a business called Amsterdam Lab, which immediately made me think, oh, right, he's dealing in weed.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
That's immediately what I thought, right? And turns out he is he's a broadcaster, he's a podcaster, he's done shows, he's been involved in putting stuff together, and he's listened to us for a while, and he kind of took some inspiration from us, and he sent the nicest email. I mean, it's something I occasionally you get these emails from people, which are all very they're very sweet and they mean well, but they're just saying nice things. You can see I don't know how to take a compliment properly. But Wade's email was cool because, I mean, why don't you say it? Then I don't feel like an idiot saying it myself. He basically said, he's starting up his own thing. And like I've said, sometimes there are people who've inspired me in the career I'm in and in the business that we've started. And I thought, well, it's nice to hear from somebody who we've managed to do some inspiration for. So you take it away, Wade. Tell us about you and where you come from, what you started here, and what you're up to.
Sure. Well, morning, guys.
Morning.
So, well, to be honest, I actually got my inspiration back before Cliff and I got my inspiration from Gareth when you're still on radio presenting the afternoon drive. That's how ancient I am. People say, "Oh, I used to listen to Gareth on my way to school. I used to listen to Gareth coming home from school." And I remember all the kinds of topics that you would have on your show, and that made me realize, well, this is what I want to do. You engage a lot of people, you influence a lot of people, and you had me hooked with your talent, with your personality, and I thought, this is the career I want. And I remember reading something a long time ago. You did an interview in some magazine, and a lot of people who complained about you said they listen to you because they want to know what you're going to say again. They want to know what you're going to do again.
Right.
And I thought, well, this is what I want to do. I want to entertain people. I want to inspire people. So I kind of got my inspiration from you, just like you did with Howard.
Howard Stern, you're talking about, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Howard Stern. And yeah, I think you've been inspired by a guy who basically rewrote the rule book on radio. And
listen, Wade, there's something not great about your microphone. I don't know what the settings are there, but since we're both in the business of sound, let's get that right so that people don't start laughing at us. I don't know what's happening on the microphone there. Can you just go into your settings there and see if it's all set up properly? I don't know why the hell we're getting like it's extremely soft and it sounds like it's gated. If we're gonna get into audio, it sounds like it's before it goes through the processor. It sounds like it's being gated. Just see if you can reset those. If you go into your I mean, it looks like such a professional setup, but your sound is like horrible. So I don't know what's going on there. Just see if you can fiddle with those settings. Talk to me now.
How does that sound? Is that better?
No, still sounds crap. I mean, it almost would be better on the phone at this point because it sounds so horrible. Right, Mbulelo, you can hear this too?
It's yeah, and he was sounding great just now. I don't know what's happened. Maybe
Yeah.
it's Mark
You know what?
Zuckerberg.
Maybe it's Zuckerberg's fault. Just leave the recording, come back, and then we'll see if it's any better. I want to see if we can improve this because it looks like the most professional setup ever. So just leave the studio and then re-click on the link and let's see if we can get you back in.
See if that helps.
Yeah, let's see if we can improve that. So, Mbulelo, I've got to talk to you about something because people are asking about it. They want to know about the Euro, the football, and some people are fanatical about this thing. I'm one of the few who isn't, because I really only watch World Cup soccer, and I've never made excuses for that. But like, some people are losing their mind about this tournament. They're
I like how you
hugely,
say some people.
well, a lot of people, like millions of
Yeah.
people. in the
No,
world.
like 3 or 4 billion, Gareth. It's only like 3
Yeah.
billion people are watching the Euros. The numbers are out.
So it's a few. Okay. Yeah. Kill me for one or two.
No, sure. Listen, yeah, it's a semi-final. It's football's coming home. Of course, is the big thing tomorrow. England play Denmark. Yeah, it's painful. It's painful.
Yeah.
Now, so I don't know if you know, there was a guy who nearly he had like a heart attack. Christian Eriksen. But now it's turned into a bit of a, like, the guy's fine, but all over social media it's become the Christian Eriksen show more than.
Well, because we thought we were watching a snuff film. That's why.
The guy is fine.
People thought he was dying there and then on camera. You know, it's amazing how, like, when the cameras are on, everything changes. Before that, nobody was particularly interested in his health. Now everyone in the world is suddenly interested in his health. It's ridiculous.
And the guy is fine. Like,
Yeah.
can we move? I mean, every game now they're bringing out a Christian Eriksen shirt. The
But
guy's fine. He didn't
But
die.
he can't play anymore, right?
No. He'll be. It looks like he'll be back. No. It looks like he'll be back. Science is a wonderful thing. Yeah. So it looks like he will be back. So that's tomorrow. Yeah, tonight is the battle of what people call the Africa of Europe. Italy and Spain haven't paid taxes in years. They have their citizens. Both countries are crumbling. So yeah, it's Italy, Spain tonight, and that'll be the games certainly of the tournament in terms of quality. So that should be fun.
Okay.
But to the Greeks, Italians, and Spanish, pay some taxes for crying in a bucket.
Well, I'm going to get Stefano Vigoriti, who's been a friend of our show for a long time. We actually did a World Cup special with him when the last World Cup rolled around. And Stefano was one of those people who, whenever I actually watch a soccer match, it doesn't happen often, but when I do, I think of him. I just want to try Wade's sound here again. Let's see if we've improved this here a little bit. Wade, talk to me. Let's see.
Let's see if is this better.
It's a bit better, but it's still it sounds weird. It sounds like you put processing on the thing. Anyway, it's fine. I mean, this will work. I don't want you to have to stress about it. Yeah, it's better than it was. So anyway, dude, you send me this email. Let me just read a part of it quickly. So you said that you'd mentioned me when you think about people who inspired you to get into what you're doing. Now, you've worked on various radio stations in the UK. You've been fired from almost all of them. I want to find out about that. And you decided to start your own podcasting business called Amsterdam Lab, which I mentioned earlier. And once the dust has settled, you said, and you've been vaccinated, you're hoping to travel to New York in December to find out what really makes podcasting so successful over there. And you were wondering if you could stop by and visit us on your way through South Africa. And of course you could do that still, but I thought, well, why not just meet you on the show live this morning? So I haven't spoken to you before this. And I thought we'd just get you on the show. I hope you didn't think I was being rude and ignoring your email.
Not at all, no. Not at all.
All right, so tell me about Amsterdam Lab and what that is.
So Amsterdam Lab is, and I hope you guys can hear me as
we can hear you now. That's
clear
good.
as possible.
Yeah.
So Amsterdam Lab is kind of very similar to Cliff Central in a way. One of the reasons I started Amsterdam Lab is because, I was tired of having to build a program and having it broken down by management. And I'm sure anyone in the industry, like Gareth, will understand that it gets frustrating when you want to build something and then they keep breaking it down.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons I started Amsterdam Lab. The other reason I started Amsterdam Lab is because I also wanted to give opportunities to like-minded, talented people. You know, having worked on radio, I've seen the pile of demo tapes that hardly get listened to. And I thought, you know, give these guys a chance, because something that used to irritate me about radio, and especially programmers, is if you don't sound right, they'll always say, oh, you don't fit our image, or you don't fit our brand.
Well, there used to be this thing that they used to say people had to have a radio voice. So you had to sound like this. You know, you have to have this very deep voice, and you had to be able to essentially do those things that they do in commercials, like you know, the movie voices and the kind of sound that I'm talking about. It's just so it's a cliched. But why were you fired from all these radio stations? What did you do? Was it the content, or were you just being a lazy slob?
To be honest, I was telling it as it was.
Right.
And obviously in the UK, it's very hoity-toity. So yeah, I would say stuff
what kind of thing
obviously they weren't used to. And
yeah, but they fired you over exactly saying what? I mean, like, this is always the best stuff.
Calling people out. So, you know, you'd call politicians out, or you would say something horrible about a celebrity, or you would say something horrible about a new song that Little Mix made.
No.
And, you know, in that industry, you're supposed to keep your mouth shut and just play the song. Don't let politics interfere, or don't let anything interfere with the product that they give you. So
they literally called you in after you'd done a show, and they said to you, you're out. Just for that.
That's the radio edits, yeah. You know, one thing I'll never forget is,
no,
you know, when this happens and they call you into the office, they always come with this file, and it's always got like statements of stuff that you did that you can't even remember that you did, and then they go through it, and it's like, I did that, I said that.
Yeah, but
it's almost like they wait for the perfect moment to bring this file out of all the.
Have you ever been with someone in a relationship? And I hate to say this, it's going to sound hugely sexist, but women are very good at this. They keep a record, and they remember stuff that you don't, right? So when you did something 2 years ago and you said something then, and you thought it was over and you'd totally forgotten about it, they still have it in their heads, and they just suddenly call it up just out of memory. And they're like, do you remember when you said X, Y, and Z? And you go, what? I said that? And they use it. They put it together with all the other stuff, and then it makes you look extra horrible. And they go, this is the kind of monster that you are. This is why it's impossible to deal with you. And you suddenly go, oh, okay. I mean, stuff that you don't even know you did to them is still hugely relevant. It's terrible. All right, so you worked in radio for a while. Were these big commercial stations, or were these kind of, because there are 100,000 radio stations in the UK?
Yeah, there were small community-based stations. Most of my material, most of the time that I did get suspended, which was on varsity radio. Which, you know, as you've stated so many times, you should experiment on varsity radio.
No, you just break the rules. For one place, you get away with it too.
Exactly. So yeah, it was, you know, I had a platform that I needed to experiment with, and I felt like the only place I could do this was on radio. And the funny thing is, a lot of people always thought that I was this really mean, horrible person in general, but no, you know, I just wanted to be different. I didn't want to just play music.
Do you have you know, friends, girlfriend, family around you? Like, where are your living circumstances at the moment, and where are you? Are you in Amsterdam now?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm in Amsterdam. Hence, that's where the name comes from for the company that I started. And a lot of people always ask me, especially when potential sponsors want to advertise on your platform, they always ask you, so where does Amsterdam Lab come from? And then you start explaining where the name comes from. So obviously Amsterdam, that's where we're based.
Right.
And I came up with lab because, well, in a laboratory, you create stuff and you experiment with stuff.
Right.
And, well, yeah, that's what we do. So it's always funny when you explain the whole history of the name, and then and it's almost like they knew right from the beginning that's what you're talking about. Oh, yes, I understand.
Yeah. But you've gone through this dreary explanation because they ask stupid questions. So I'll please forgive me for asking a stupid question then. So what are you up to there? I mean, have you got family over there? When did you move to Amsterdam?
So yeah, my family's still back in the UK. I decided to just jump ship and start a whole new experience in Amsterdam. I lived in the UK for 13 years, and I needed a break from the whole, hoity-toity kind of lifestyle. And I just
what made you choose Amsterdam, and where do you live in Amsterdam now? What kind of things do you kind of do on the daily, and what is the lockdown like there?
So to answer the last question about lockdown, we had a lockdown, but I mean it was nothing compared to what France and Germany have. We still had quite a lot of freedom.
Right.
And especially now, they've just recently lifted a lot of the restrictions. So face masks, nightclubs are open, which is a huge breeding ground for corona, but that's a story for another day. So yeah, the lockdown in the Netherlands was very similar to Sweden. I mean, Sweden hardly ever had a lockdown at all. And in fact, the Netherlands was actually one of the last countries in Europe that actually implemented the face mask rule because they hesitated. They didn't believe it was they didn't think it was going to work. So yeah, they were one of the last countries to do it, and now they're one of the first countries to actually lift the face mask rule. So yeah, so Amsterdam, I mean, is a pretty cool place to live. There's actually, I was reading something the other day, and they were actually saying Amsterdam is one of the best places if you are a entrepreneur or if you are a startup company, as it's a very huge tech city. It's very tech innovative here. So yeah, it's awesome. I love it here. The kind of things I enjoy doing, well, yeah, I'm almost very similar to you, Gareth, in a way. I hardly go to nightclubs or anything like that. I enjoy sitting, listening to music, reading about history, the news. I like learning new things.
I used to enjoy reading about the news. I don't know anymore. Kind of over it. Well, listen, dude. I mean, it's really good to meet you, and thank you for being on the show with us this morning. And listen, good luck with your business. I hope it picks up nicely. And when you're in SA, come and give us a visit. Say hi.
Would love to. Yeah,
Maybe we'll even.
I can't wait for freedom to come back in general. It'll be good.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. But there he is. So Wade Hutchinson, everybody, he's started a business called Amsterdam Lab in Holland, and he's busy doing podcasting. And if you're ever in Holland, you must visit him, and vice versa. If he comes here, nice to see you, man. Good to talk to you. There he is. All right. So that's Wade. I thought, well, you know what? Rather than going some boring email exchange, I thought let's just get him on the show, see what he's up to. Yes. And you can always get hold of us, Gareth@cliffcentral.com. Tell us what your story is, where you come from. And if you listen to us from somewhere else in the world, then we want to meet you, like we did this morning with Wade. All right. A couple of things to to get into today, because we've got JJ Cornish joining us just now. He is, of course, our authoritative commentator on African affairs. We'll speak to him in African analysis. We're going to talk a little bit about Botswana this morning, because even though they're a neighbor of ours, how much do you really know about Botswana, right?
Yeah,
how much do you know about what's going on over there? Because it's actually a fascinating country. The population's tiny. I know we've spoken to O'Neill before, and O'Neill comes from Botswana, so he kind of gives us a bird's eye view of what it's like to be in that country and what it's like to be from that country. But I thought there are plenty of people that I know who are from Botswana, and we've got to find out a little bit more about our neighbor. So JJ will fill us in about that. And we've got a new episode of Blind History today. In fact, it's the final episode of this season. It is episode 13, and it is Royals Behaving Badly. So it's a précis of 6 of the worst kings and queens, or not necessarily the worst, but kings and queens who really disappointed all of us by just not being particularly inspiring or successful rulers. There are 3 women and 3 men, so you can't accuse us of sexism.
That's good.
It's very important because that's the number one thing. If you're going to accuse anyone of anything these days, it's sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and then all the others: Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. You got to really rank your prejudices, especially on this show.
Yes, I would like those color charts. I would like Social Justice Warriors to release a chart of where does, I don't know, transphobia rank compared to racism, just so I know when I'm in a bad mood, like, what are the consequences?
Yeah, I think, do you reckon that racism comes before sexism? I think so. I think people are much more afraid of being called a racist than they are of being called a sexist.
Man, that's I'd rather be called sexist than racist. So yeah, in my mind.
Yeah, but that's because you're black, you see. White people are shit scared of being called a racist. It's like the worst thing that can happen to them.
No, I think being called racist for me is the worst accusation in the world, because what it says is I'm incapable of seeing you as human. For me, there's nothing worse you could say.
Understand? I mean, we're kind of making fun of this, but at the same time, the serious reality is, like, there isn't very much that's worse than racism.
Yeah,
there isn't. But if you're a white person and you're called that, I'm not saying you are it, but if you're called it for white people, it's like the end. They may as well just fall on their sword right there and then. It's nothing worse you could do.
I'm not racist. I'm like friends. Plus, it's Carol at the office. She's so smart. She's so
right.
White people get so tetchy in South Africa about that whole thing.
My domestic work is part of my family.
Like, who I need to stop is the people that do this one. Grace is like my second mom. I'm like, oh my god, you actually need to leave right now. Leave right now.
Oh man, but I do think so it goes racism, then sexism, then probably. I mean, I've always thought that anti-Semitism is the worst of all, because anti-Semitism is a hatred of people not just because of their ethnic background; it's also cultural and religious. So it's like it's the big. That's you have to hate someone so completely to be an anti-Semite, and it's also the fountain of all the rest of it, right? Because
no good.
I would put that one top. If you called me an anti-Semite, I'd be even more upset with you than if you called me a general racist, because you might be racist towards Chinese people in some people's opinion. You might be racist towards black people in someone's opinion, but that's a lot more general than anti-Semitism carries with it, and it's got such an ugly history, right? So if you call someone an anti-Semite, you're throwing them in the box there with like Adolf Hitler and some of the worst people in human history. And although racists are just as bad, you can say that anti-Semitism comes from an even darker place in some ways, because some people are just racist because they're ignorant, but you actually have to be taught to be anti-Semitic in terms of culture, history, ethnic background. You have to hate a bunch of people for being, not just for how they turned out biologically. You know what I mean? Anyway, I mean, listen, this is a serious. We're turning this into philosophy. It just started off as an offhanded comment. We've got to get to some headlines, so let's do that quickly and look at what's going on in the news. There are quite a few things happening. Someone asked just now, "Are we on the brink of civil war?" Don't panic. South Africans are too lazy to go to civil war.
Yeah,
but there are things that threaten us in a very serious way. Like, for example, the residents of Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, and Tshwane are facing water shortages. Now, if you want people to totally give up, cut off their water. Pumping stations are currently at 55% of normal capacity. The cause of an explosion in Gauteng is yet unknown. Repairs are underway. Details of the affected suburbs will be communicated by municipalities, and that's really all we know at the moment. But in Gauteng, can you imagine if you took away people's water? Then they'd really be upset with you, you know?
You're condemning them to death.
Exactly. So I think that this is something that this is really very, very serious. If you want people to to take up arms against the government, then cut off their water for more than 3 days. You'll see how quickly they get upset. I'm not even going to tell you about this, but gunmen have kidnapped 140 school students in northwest Nigeria. It feels almost like it's a Groundhog Day when those stories come up, because there isn't a week that goes by without Nigeria making the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Right? Horrible.
So
and then
sure.
A decision to not allow swimming caps that are designed for afro hair at international competitions could be reconsidered after there was a backlash. Solcap said FINA, which is the water sports world governing body, has told them that the hats aren't suitable because they don't follow the natural form of the head. So the whole point of wearing a cap when you're swimming is to streamline you, is to make you faster in the water, right?
Yes.
So apparently this is a hat that this company called Solcap have devised, and they say that this is just pure racism, obviously, the thing we were just talking about. And Alice Deering, who is a black woman who represents Great Britain in the Olympic swimming, she wears this, and they've said to her, no, it's not tight enough on your head, basically. And so she said, oh, is it because of my hair? Is it because I is black? And they said, no, actually, because the whole reason you wear a swimming cap is not for fashion. It's to make you faster. So maybe you're not as fast as they think you are. Anyway, they should just throw her out of the team and get on with it, because she doesn't understand. She's too stupid to understand in this case. Jeff Bezos and his technical advisor, Colin Breyer, I don't know who this guy is, but apparently at that time, Amazon was a multi-billion-dollar company. However, they were headed to Amazon Customer Services Center, and they were going to spend 2 days as customer service agents. The whole reason I'm telling you this story is because this guy has taken over from Jeff Bezos. And he remembers when they were driving together in that journey I just told you about. He remembers Jeff actually taking the calls himself from the service center. He recalls that a complaint on one product kept coming in. Jeff's eyes went wide. Bezos was frustrated. There was clearly something wrong with the product. It hadn't been escalated. Later that day, he sent out an email asking for more efficient ways of flagging faulty products. And he's stepping down as CEO, Jeff Bezos, 27 years after he founded the company. And he's handing over to this dude. So this is very exciting. He's no longer the CEO because, of course, he's got to go up in that rocket. He's got lots of other stuff on his agenda. And he's decided that being CEO of Amazon isn't as important for him now, and they've got better people to run it.
So he's doing the full divorce thing because he left his wife. He's leaving his company. So I wonder what he's leaving next. Yeah, no, solid stuff. Wholehearted approach.
But they're busy talking about, his role at Blue Origin and how that's going to be picked up. Blue Origin, of course, the space exploration company that he started, space travel company. But he's a very smart man, clearly. And, a lot of people who hate Jeff Bezos, those people who signed that petition to not have him return to Earth. Do you remember some 60-odd thousand people said, well, you can go, Jeff Bezos, but please don't come back. There are a lot of people who hate him just because he's wealthy. But please remember, before Jeff Bezos came along, you weren't buying stuff on the internet. He kind of opened that door for you. And think about how that saved your life with little things. Let's think about how if you rely on Mr. Delivery or Uber Eats,
Yeah.
No, that come along. Yeah, that wouldn't be as fast-flowing, smooth, and efficient as it is. It started off with books, and he said he started with books because that was something that was easy to categorize, to ship, to sell, to warehouse, to be able to list, and he put it all together over a period of couple of years in his garage. He wasn't a rich, powerful man from the start who played with daddy's money. He was a seriously brilliant individual, and he has made life a whole lot better for all of us. I'm a massive book fan, as if you can't tell from the background, but I love reading. And I will say to you that it used to piss me off to go to the bookstore and you'd look for a book and it wasn't there. And they'd have to order it from the publishers. Jeff Bezos solved that problem in my life. And I'm willing to give up a couple of rand, and I've bought books on Amazon many times. He deserves the money he's got. You know what people tend to forget about billionaires and people who've really made huge successes themselves financially is the reason that we give them our money is because they're doing something for us in return. They've made our lives easier, better, more efficient. They've given us the products we want at prices that outcompete everybody else. So yes, I know it's sad for the little local bookstore, and there are still bookstores, by the way. I go to them too. But thank you, Jeff Bezos. You deserve your billions. And you know what? You also decide to step down as CEO with everyone's blessing because you've put 27 years of hard work into that business and you've been rewarded. And I think that that's where the story stops. Anyone who hates him, you're allowed to, but you probably
people like him. People like him, Oprah, you know, they've won at the Capitalism Olympics. They've won at their craft. He's so much more valuable to us. I hope he doesn't go wherever he wants to leave Earth to. Is that he's more valuable in universities, no matter what you think of universities right now. I know but he's so much more valuable teaching now. Like, you know, and this is if he's willing, of course. I think he's done enough for us, but he's not valuable sitting in an office for 15 hours or whatever his work ethic is. I'd love him to teach the next generation. So he should let someone else run it. Amazon's fine. No, you know what I mean? Yeah. He's so much more valuable in our society now, rather than just sitting in an office running an empire. He's literally 1 in a billion.
Corona's Boring says, I hate him because of what he did to authors and publishers, which is a valid point. But remember that without Amazon, I doubt very much that publishing would have become as democratized as it has. Now it's very easy for people everyone can be an author. And that was not possible a couple of years ago, because if they didn't like your writing style, they didn't think you were famous enough, they didn't give you a publishing deal, you were screwed. Now you can publish your own book, you can list it on Amazon, and you can sell a couple of 100 copies, which was impossible before. And if you're hugely successful, like J.K. Rowling, you can sell millions of books on Amazon.
Yeah, it's true.
Don't forget, like, she wouldn't have been the success that she was if she hadn't had another outlet to sell on, like Amazon.com. There are countries all over the world where people are so far away from the bookshop that it's impossible for them to buy a whole series of books like the Harry Potter series unless they can order it all on Amazon. So if you're hugely successful and you're a brilliant writer, you'll make money thanks to Amazon, but not only exclusively thanks to Amazon. And if you are an unsuccessful and horrible writer, you can also be a success because of Amazon. At least, proportionally, you'll be a success. Instead of selling hundreds of millions of books, you'll sell 100 books. But, be grateful that there's a place you can sell. Publishing houses have screwed over authors. Let them burn, says Eleutheria. Well, that's a controversial point of view.
Jeez. Yeah.
But there are lots of new people in the publishing game now. And you can self-publish on Amazon, says Eleutheria. He's helped authors. See, that's the whole point. Take-A-Lot started by selling and linking to Amazon's website by buying shipping containers of stuff until they discovered that bypassing customs, it worked, and they became huge and took out Kalahari. I remember Kalahari.com as well. Do you? It's like the first South African version of Amazon. And now look at Take-A-Lot. I mean, my sister, for example, she's obsessed with Take-A-Lot. That's where she goes before she goes to the shops. She'll go into Take-A-Lot first to see if she can find what she wants there. Because why bother getting in the car and going somewhere and having to load and unload things or package them, worry about them breaking on the way or whatever else it is? These guys can do it. And Steph says Amazon rocks same-day deliveries, right? I mean, that's the whole point. Where do you get? So guess what? He gets some money back as a result of that. Isn't that fantastic? Doesn't he deserve it?
You know what? it saves me hours. Like, I don't want to go around and walk around in shops. Now, for some people, going to the shops is the greatest thing they do in their lives. I absolutely hate it. It's 3 hours of my life walking around.
Right.
When, okay, I get a list, I do it in 25 minutes, and that's my life now. I've got 3 hours back. I can do stuff. Shopping is not enjoyable, and it's inefficient. Actually, it's a very inefficient way to do your life, walking around with a trolley and talking to Sally behind the counter who doesn't actually care about their job at exclusive books.
And once they've got same-day deliveries all over the world, which they will have eventually, and drone deliveries and all the other stuff, it's not even gonna be a question. People are gonna be like, yes, let him have as much money as he gets. Deserves it.
No, it's I don't get why people would, okay, the billionaire thing, whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But Bezos, get yourself to some universities, pal. We need your help to actually get ourselves driven and stop talking about identity politics. Let's get and Oprah, please get into universities, teach people how to have some grit. Like, these people have grit as well. For the billions are what they are, but you got to have some grit. You think Bezos didn't have 50 companies try and take him out? You think Oprah didn't have 60 people try and take her out as she rose to the top? You must be kidding yourself.
They had to fight in the beginning and right up to the end. I mean, listen, they're still fighting. Silas says, just read Invent and Wonder, the collected writings of Jeff Bezos, and you hear how revolutionary he is, and he changed the online retail and tech world. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what we admire about these people now. And they really are. If there's any group of people who are supremely powerful in the world today, it isn't actually politicians. It isn't the people who run little corporations all over the world, or bankers, or property owners, the way that it used to be in the past. The seriously powerful people are that handful of people in Silicon Valley who actually control our day-to-day stuff, who are responsible for the platforms that we use on a daily basis, the social media platforms, the YouTubes, the Googles. Those people are tremendously powerful. And 15 years ago, you mostly wouldn't have known their names, right?
Absolutely. You know why people resent people like Oprah and Bezos now is that, we live in this time of, it's about work and life balance. And you know what? I'm not giving my soul. Like, we need people like Bezos who are extremists, like Oprah, they will do 20 hours a day. It's not for everybody. By the way, not everybody should be a billionaire, because not everybody wants to do 15 years of 18 hours at the office for no pay. And this idea, it's because.
And by the way, why do you think his wife was so happy to leave him eventually? Because he was probably never home.
In fact, it's going to be the same life. Yeah, them being divorced isn't changing their lives.
Yeah, no, exactly. And she's moved on very quickly, by the way. Mackenzie, I think her name is. She's already got a new boyfriend. It was one of the school teachers of the kids. So, yeah, good for her.
Did she get a settlement?
Oh, are you joking? She had, I think she got half of his.
Half?
No, she didn't get half of his Amazon stock. She got a significant portion. But she's like worth a couple of billion. She's got like, I don't know, $20 to $30 billion. She's easily one of the richest women in the world. In fact, she's one of the richest people in the world just from her settlement. So, yeah,
it's insane. Okay. It is so insane.
We're trying to get hold of JJ Cornish because we want to talk to him about Botswana, but I think we're having some trouble there. So if we don't get him for you this morning, we'll try again later on in the week. But I've also got some emails I want to get to here, and a couple of other things. While we're talking about rich people, can I just ask you about what you think is going on with Nick Cannon? Nick Cannon just had his 7th child, okay, and his 4th baby this year. He's had 4 babies in a year. Model Alyssa Scott, who appeared to confirm that she was expecting a son with Cannon on Father's Day, announced that she had welcomed another baby boy. This is just unbelievable. The guy's got 7 kids. Can he just keep it in his pants, please? Is it necessary for him to have 7 children? Is it necessary for anyone to have 7 children these days?
No, absolutely not. What the hell? What is wrong with celebrity? 4 different kids in 1 year with 4 different women.
I assume so. There's no way any woman can have 4 kids in a year, considering the gestation period is 9 months.
Where do you want the baby to gestate? In a box? Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
what is
Amazon can't deliver babies.
Yeah, Bezos, put that in your pipe and smoke it. Yeah, that's ridiculous. He's an idiot. I think Nick Cannon's an idiot for that. Anybody with having 7 children in 2021 is an idiot in my mind.
Well, didn't we find out just before he died that DMX had something like 20 children? I mean, Jacob Zuma's got 22 children.
Yeah, but Jacob Zuma's an idiot.
Yeah.
So that point stands, and Nick Cannon is an idiot. You don't need 7 kids. Like, and you know what? What happens now? Where do these kids? Who do they stay with? You know how important it is to have two. We know the evidence is out there now in psychology and psychoanalysis. You need a stable home. You need a 2-parent home. You need, ideally, you need the actual parents. Is what the evidence suggests,
and preferably not someone who's a celebrity TV personality like Nick Cannon, who's constantly working on TV shows, because I don't think he's around for his kids very much. Like Jeff Bezos wasn't, frankly.
You know what that is? That's trashy behavior. Actually, that's all it is. I don't know where Nick Cannon's from, but that's trashy behavior. I don't care if you got money, you can be trashy. That is trash.
Well, yeah. I mean, Carl's got a suggestion here. I don't know what you think of this, but Carl says it's irresponsible. He should pay additional tax to help the environment. 2 is enough. I have said a couple of times, you cannot be an environmentalist and have more than 2 children. One to replace you and one to replace your wife. If you have more than that and you're an environmentalist, you're just full of shit. And I can't believe you. I can't take you seriously, because you can go on about like, the environment and carbon dioxide and the greenhouse effect and how rubbish and litter is a problem, and each human with all the packaging that we use and all the stuff that we order from Amazon, blah, blah, blah. But if you're having more than 2 people, you're filling the earth with unnecessary people. And I know that sounds very eugenicist of me, but that's not the point. You can have 2 kids. Everyone should be able to have 2 kids. And if you want to have more, you can have them, but you should pay a little bit of a tax on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and so on. I think maybe we just ramp it up per kid. Like your taxes double for every kid after 4. You can have 3 maybe.
Too much. 3 is too much. Who are you that you need 3 of you? Like, that's an ego play. 2 is enough.
You with me on 2. 2 is a good replacement value, and then
2, yeah.
Because we've got what, 7 billion of us already. I think that's a sustainable number. We don't need more.
No, we don't. And it's kind of like people that have pets as well, is you should pay an incredible amount of tax. That's why I like the European approach to it, is that it should be numerous. Yeah. So, like in France, having a dog it's not like having dogs here. You got to pay, like, that's why very few people in and South Africans that think they're entitled to a dog because they broke up with someone and then they're never at home to look after the thing. You're revolting people. If you're going to have pets, you must treat them like a child.
Well,
and it should be expensive to have a pet, because you should be able to give it your love like a child. I'm sorry.
What do you think of Mongezi's comment here? Mongezi says Nick can have as many kids as he wants, just as long as he takes care of them financially. Nothing's worse than bringing a child into squalor and absolute misery.
Money's not enough, because we've seen rich kids that turn into drug. I mean, Tom Hanks's kid, right? Money is not enough, because kids go on drugs. If you ignore them, they become delinquents. So money is not enough.
Chet Hayes. Chet Hayes is Tom Hanks's child. That is a disaster of a human being.
Yeah. The idea that he had a Jamaican at a stage.
Yeah, he's a rapper. He had dreadlocks, and he thought he was. He started speaking in Ebonics.
No, patois. He started speaking Jamaican patois.
Yeah, do me a favor, this guy. So, anyway, yeah. Just if you're thinking of having more than 2 kids, just look at Tom Hanks's Chet Hayes, and also think about it this way. Like, I know that you could have the next Beethoven, or you could produce the next Einstein. You could, but you could also produce the next loser.
Yeah.
You could produce a really unimpressive child. I want This is interesting. Jeremy says you've got to check out the names of Nick's children. So let me just look this up quickly because this is actually quite funny. In the 80s, you used to need a license to have a bicycle. That's a comment that I just got now.
Yeah, we need to go back.
Yeah.
Because it becomes conspicuous, right? It's almost a conspicuous type of sort of reproduction. And for me, it's this idea that people are born special. No. It is your job from the day you are born to become interesting. You're not born interesting, by the way. Being born is not something special. I know we infuse in our society now is every child that's born is interesting and special. None of us are special. It is your job every single day to make yourself special and interesting.
Okay. Listen to these names. This is why he shouldn't have children.
Oh, let's hear it.
All right.
So
he's got 7 kids. Their names are Powerful Queen Cannon.
What?
This is the one who was born in December last year. Powerful Queen Cannon. Golden Sagan Cannon. He was married to Mariah Carey, I forgot about that.
Yeah, but she's a lunatic as well. They deserved each other.
Monroe and Moroccan Scott Cannon. Those are the twins that he had in the beginning. Those are Mariah Carey's kids with him. Then he's got Golden Sagan and then Powerful Queen. And this youngest one, I can't tell. Hang on. Oh, here we go. Abby Della Rosa, Zion, Mixolydian, and Zillion Air Cannon. Zillion Air Cannon. H-E-I-R. Yeah, how's that? And the last one, the youngest one is called Zen. This one that was born on Father's Day. Zen Cannon. Jesus, what names.
You know what is so annoying about parents who name their kids terrible names like this is that it's all about them. When you name a child, please understand that you will die at some stage. That child has that name forever. Don't try and express yourself. Just let's stick to Abo, Mbulelo, Skumbuzo, Gareth, Michelle.
There are other people on earth who have that name to prove that it's a human name.
But I think I've told you before what the problem is that we don't stop good-looking girls between the ages of 16 and 25 believing in star signs and crystals, so they'll do ridiculous things like say a name can be powerful. It can elicit in a Sagittarius something which they'll release only. If we stop those,
those people shouldn't. They're not. I can guarantee you, if you give your kid weird names like that, you're probably not a good parent. That's the general rule. Like I'd say there's a 5 to 10% chance that I'm wrong on that front. But if you give your kid a weird name, you're probably a shitty parent. Jesse says, my neighbor has 6 kids. He's 24. His wife's 27. 6 kids already. Yes.
What the hell?
At 24.
When did she start?
Do they know what's happening there? I mean, like, they're obviously having a lot of sex. Maybe they don't realize that that's where kids come from. Really, like, because I don't think people are. It's a huge responsibility in these days. Even if it's not a responsibility, it's a cost. So even if you're an irresponsible person, you know that kids cost money, right? So maybe they don't understand. Maybe they're not sure how the kids are actually made.
Listen.
Anyway, Moon Unit crazy. Zappa is one of my favorite names, says Corona's boring. Well, I remember Frank Zappa had 3 kids, as far as I can remember. Moon Unit, Dweezil, and there was some other name as well. That's. Do these people not know that condoms are free, says Katu Cat. Yeah, exactly. And Derek is correct. Remember what Musk wanted to call his kid? He wanted to name him with a whole lot of apostrophes and things. Remember?
That's my one criticism of Musk. He's got a whole soccer team. How many has he got now? 10.
Yeah.
As well. No, that's my one criticism of him.
If you had to have a kid now, what would you call it, Mbulelo?
It would depend. Am I having it with a South African lady? I mean, if what happens if she's Scandinavian? To be honest, I've always thought if I have a kid, I don't care about names that much. Like we're not naming them eucalyptus. But you can, I mean, the person who has it for 9 months in their belly, you name it. I honestly don't care about names. They mean nothing. Once you've named
the other problem with calling your child eucalyptus, with all the love in the world, is that the kid's never going to spell properly. Because if you start off life having to write your name down and eucalyptus starts with a, and you like an E, and they're like, oh no, I can't spell. Yeah.
Break their confidence early. Names mean nothing. They're just letters. Like we made up language, by the way. It's not something sentient. Just name your child Stephen or Skombozo and let them go to school and actually be present.
You know, these days you don't have to actually have children to have the experience of having children. If you live in 2021, you can get games like these Sims games where you can pretend that you're a happy family and you can call your children the weirdest names you want, and then you can switch the game off at night. And you don't have to feed and clothe and educate that child in the real world. So if you really have this hankering to make more of yourself, and it's all about you, and you're not sure that you could be a good parent, just play the computer version game, or get a Tamagotchi or something, or get a pot plant. Because if you kill the pot plant, you're not going to be had up on murder charges. No one has to be miserable.
And also, please stop this madness. Don't practice with a pet. What if you're a terrible person? Because pets are real things, right? For me, I don't have any pets.
Right.
Yeah. Don't practice with pets. You might be a disgusting human, and now, there we go. Now this poor dog, because I hate every other pet than dogs.
To wrap this up, because I can't believe it, but we're already at 7:00. It feels like we just started the show 5 minutes ago. But parenting is the most hard, serious job you will ever undertake in your life. Forget about Jeff Bezos and Amazon, right? CEO of Amazon is nothing compared to being a father or a mother of a child. And I'm saying this because I am actually objective. I don't have kids of my own. And I've seen really great examples of parents, and I've seen terrible examples of parents. And I can tell you now, that is the toughest job of all. So if you are a stay-at-home mom or dad, all power to you. And if you are the kind of person who's putting enormous effort into trying to raise a child that the rest of us will appreciate rather than hate, power to you. Thank you for that. You're doing the world an enormous, enormous service. And even from those of us who don't have kids, we appreciate those parents who make the effort to raise great children, because we're going to live among them. And God knows we need more good ones and less shitty ones. So please, parents, keep doing a good job if you're doing a good job. If you're doing a bad job, I suppose you can't turn back time, but fucking get your shit together. All right, it is time for us to take a break at 7:00. We're going to come back in a moment or two. We've got, among other things, blind history on the way for you and plenty more. This is cliffcentral.com. Good morning.
This week on Auto Central.
Last question comes from Megan, who's asked, I wanted to ask what the AMG line is in a normal Mercedes. So this would be almost like an A200 with the AMG badging.
Well, Megan, first off, we were talking about the 333i Alpina earlier on, which was the pre-shadow line kind of body styling, etc. And then Mercedes-Benz got into the AMG body styling. So AMG simply denotes a cosmetic upgrade. It doesn't have any engine upgrades. Catch Auto Central, SA's #1 motoring podcast, every Monday at 9 a.m.
Just because it's about technology, connecting your business to the rest of the world doesn't mean you need to send rockets to space and use complicated solutions. Want to simplicate things? Well, join Jaco Voigt, who is the CEO of Catalytic, on the Unbundled podcast. With skin in the game and a keen focus on educating and assisting you and your business, Jaco decodes all the aspects of connectivity, security, and cloud solutions. Unbundled is brought to you by Catalytic and is available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Cliffcentral.com on a Tuesday morning. It is the 6th of July and we are live. If you're listening to us on the podcast, then I'm sorry that if you came especially to hear JJ Cornish, you haven't had him yet this morning, but we were trying to connect him. Had a couple of problems on his side technically, so we will try to get him back at a later stage. You can get hold of us by dropping a comment on YouTube. Don't forget, while we're talking about that, to like and subscribe, because otherwise we get into trouble. I'm always forgetting to tell you to like and subscribe, and if you don't do that, then we're not going to get the rating that we get from the algorithm. So you have to like and subscribe. It's not good enough that you just listen to us or watch us every morning. All right, so many things to get to today. I mentioned Nick Cannon, and that got us off on a whole discussion around whether or not people should be having 7 kids. But there are other stories that we need to pay attention to this morning. I don't know if you've, and this is the only bit of serious stuff that I want to do today, but if you've seen a clip that's been doing the rounds of people who are insisting that it's a good idea that children get vaccinated for COVID-19. Now, there is no reliable evidence to show that kids are as adversely affected by this COVID situation as adults are in terms of their health. They are horribly and adversely affected in terms of their schooling and everything else, their socialization. But it seems that kids are mostly in a position where they have mild cold symptoms if they get COVID. Very, very, very few children, and I mean single digits across the world, have been ill enough to die from COVID. And there is no conceivable reason that we should be testing out vaccines on kids. There are, however, various people who are suggesting that children should be part of the wall of defense that we put up against this disease, which is just unconscionable to me. And I think that, if kids are not at immediate risk for this, then they shouldn't be guinea pigs for experimentation with vaccines. It's one thing if you are 70 years old and you decide to take a vaccine and we haven't tested out the long-term ramifications of that vaccine. And I'm not speaking as an anti-vaxxer here. I'm speaking as someone who genuinely believes that these vaccines can do some good in mitigating the risk for older people. But there is no way we know for sure that in the life of a healthy 10-year-old, 20, 30 years from now, there won't be ramifications of a negative nature for children. And there was a clip going around from a guy on a channel in the UK called GB. I think his name is Ferguson, or let me just check it out. Neil Oliver. Neil Oliver's his name. And that's been doing the rounds. And I got it yesterday and I watched it. It's only about 3 minutes long, but I'm not going to play it for you here. Either way, he puts a very good case together for why we shouldn't be testing these things on kids. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
But who are these people? Is it just Gwendolyn from the local group with her friends, or is it a bunch of scientists
who want to test this out on kids? No, it's parents who are willingly giving their kids up for experimentation effectively. Now, the other thing is, like, kids don't have consent. That's the whole reason that we don't allow them to make serious adult decisions at a young age. You're not in a position to make those decisions when you're a child. And for adults to throw a child in the way of in the space between them and a disease it's the opposite of what nature wants, is what he was saying. Nature expects us to protect the children and sacrifice ourselves if we're adults. I think that's fair.
We should, if you don't have the IQ to get into a BSc degree, you shouldn't be allowed to make that decision. Sorry. You know how I hate dumb behavior in society, and you always say I defer too much to intelligence. In this case, I tell you what,
Well, not intelligence, qualification. I think you still think that. I mean, like, I know loads of people who qualified and very stupid. That's my point.
Like smart idiot. No, if you're not a doctor or a scientist, I don't want to hear from you. Stay at home and go on your afternoon walk. I don't want to hear your opinion. We're going to protect your kids until the science says otherwise.
Hey, listen, when are you going to pick up your running again? Because you obviously now doing the show in the morning, so that means that you can't go early morning runs. What can you do in the afternoons or evenings?
Yeah, look, obviously as a COVID survivor, I've got to be very careful because there may have been lung damage.
Have you done any like breathing tests or anything to check that out? Because I know what you're like.
On a very serious note, I am going on Thursday to actually check whether I've had any damage, and so that I can start getting back into exercise, because it's been. I don't want to take the chance, because I had a friend or a business associate actually die from a heart attack. He's one of the people in the world. He went for a jog in Plettenberg Bay at his house. Boom, dropped dead, and they found him on the beach.
That is hectic. Oh yeah,
so I feel fine, but I'm just going to make absolutely sure, and then I'll be back at it next week, and then I'll just run in the afternoon, and I've got a new sports scientist, so I'm going to get back in the game from next week, and then we're back at it. And I've been super miserable without it, to be honest with
you. Yeah, I think it does. It takes its toll on you, because for you, it's such a part of what you do every day, and what you did for the longest time. Let's just look at the Zuma situation, because this is something a lot of people are upset with and obsessed by at the moment, and we'll get into it some more on the Burning Platform. But I don't feel like we can afford to wait. The ANC have rejected calls from within for a political solution to Jacob Zuma's legal battles. By that they mean, we'll tell the judiciary what to do. This is how the ANC sees their role in society, is to just steamroll over stuff they don't like. It's great, huh? Anyway, they made the right decision in this case, because the party held a special NEC meeting on Monday after crowds violated COVID-19 regulations outside his home in Nkandla. Former president had continued his attack on the judiciary, slamming the Constitutional Court for sentencing to 15 months over his refusal to appear before the State Capture Commission. He's expected to be at the Pietermaritzburg High Court on Tuesday morning, arguing that he should be kept out of jail. But I thought we'd already determined what the rules were here. How come the rules change for Jacob Zuma, but not for you or me? If you and I had been sentenced to 15 months in jail for contempt of court, we would be in jail right now.
Yep.
How's it different for him?
So annoying. But predictable.
Really? Like, I do not understand how this happens. Rules for thee, no rules for me. It's if we don't have the only equality that matters, especially if you're one of these budding socialists in the world today who's like, equality. Let me just remind you, the only equality that actually matters in this world is equality before the law. Everything else is just decoration. Everything else is completely unimportant. If the law treats you and I the same, then we live in a free country. Then we can say we have equality. Everything else is nonsense, because you can't ensure equality anywhere else. But clearly in South Africa, we can't even ensure equality before the law, because this guy's been given so many reprieves, so many opportunities to do something else, to go somewhere else, to do something different, that we would never have been given as ordinary citizens. I think it is a travesty. It's disgraceful. That's me being serious this morning.
My feelings on Msholozi, I think he should have to face crimes against humanity. What he did with the Guptas isn't being taken seriously enough. He needs to be facing... People have been condemned to death because of his actions, and he did that, and he must face international court for condemning children, women, and men to death by selling this country to the Guptas. But nobody takes it that seriously.
No, of course not.
Because his killing didn't happen at the end of a barrel.
Can we just turn to something? And I feel especially aware of this, because I know if Sia was on the show, he'd be bringing it up. Can we just talk about something that happened on social media over the weekend? And maybe you don't care about this at all. Maybe this is not a thing for you. But man, Do you know who Nikki van der Walt and Leanne Liebenberg are?
Oh, Leanne Liebenberg.
No. Do you know who
she was a megastar.
So Leanne Liebenberg is she's a very pretty girl. She was married to Nikki van der Walt, who is a South African kind of socialite, restaurateur. He played polo for a while. They're a celebrity couple, effectively, and they kind of live in the spotlight. And for many people, I think they supposedly many people thought they had these great lives. Anyway, Leanne posts this thing up over the weekend. It is with great sadness that Nikki and I have made a decision to part ways after 10 years of marriage. And then she goes on to talk about some other girl. You can have him. This is all on.
No.
Oh yeah, dude. This is all on Instagram over the weekend. Let me just find the exact. Oh no, it's really bad. I mean, it's terribly embarrassing. The whole thing, very very messy. She put up this thing about like I'm over it. I'm out of here. This relationship's over. And Emily, someone or another, you can have him. So anyway, Nikki comes on a couple of you wouldn't even say minutes, like almost seconds later, and he says, "This is the husband, right?" After she's just posted this thing that they're leaving each other, and he says, "In response to my wife's post, I love her and my children dearly with all my heart. We are not getting a divorce. Lee is suffering from deep postpartum depression, and all I can do is try to be there for her, for the best of my family, whom I love and respect my whole being. I ask everyone to give us space to work through this and respect our family. Pray for her to get better so we can put it behind us and focus on our children. Leanne, I love you with all my heart, baby. Always and forever." That's on Nikki's social media, right? So obviously then, people start the social media goes crazy because these people are quite well known. And everybody's got an opinion. And is there drinking involved? Have they had a fight? Is one of them really suffering from some kind of postpartum depression? Was that a convenient excuse after the fact? Everybody's got an opinion. And remember, these are people. And of course, I've always believed that if you live by the social media sword, you will die by that sword. In other words, if you live your life, if you're showing on social media how happy your life is and how happy your family is, there's probably something that's not happy about that, because the fact is you have to share it with strangers, which is odd. And you know how I feel about social media. Sorry, generally. But in this case, I feel sorry for these people, not because I know them, because I do know them, and that is part of it. But I feel sorry for them because it's this goddamn thing. If this wasn't in the room with her, she wouldn't have posted that in the first place, right? She would have phoned a friend, maybe if she was on a landline phone or she didn't have Instagram because it's almost like a cry for help, but instead of reaching out to an actual person, you reach out to the internet. And this could happen to anybody. The fact is, the only reason we know about these two is because they're famous people. No one's going to take a screenshot of your, emotional breakdown if you are someone with 5 followers and nobody knows your name. Nobody cares about that. So the only reason we know about this is because they're famous. And I do feel sorry for them. So she had to retract her statement about this Emily girl in the latest chapter of this saga.
Why did you bring Emily into it now?
I don't know, dude. It's just it is so messy and it's so ugly. And to watch people do this to each other is horrible. So she's had to just put up this one. I retract and apologize to Emily for the allegations I made about her on the 2nd of July on my Instagram page. And then this Emily girl puts up, the apology is the result of legal action taken by me in the completely baseless and untrue defamatory allegations leveled against me. I would like to thank all my friends and family for the love and support shown to me over the last few days. Also to my legal representatives who got the job done so quickly. Now she's making it worse because she should just leave it.
Is Emily a model as well? Is publicity her currency? We got to get into this now.
Can't tell
I
you.
would imagine. Listen, I would imagine beautiful. You know, with all due respect, I know they may be your friends. They're not my friends.
No. I know them. I know them, and I've been around them. I wouldn't say friends. We don't see each other more than once every couple of years. But you know, I was on the Joburg social scene for a while, and that's how I met them. And they're very nice people. They're really not shit people. But honestly, this is just very messy and very awkward and very complicated. And everybody's talking about it, even if they don't know. You don't need to know them to be talking about it, right?
No,
I just feel sorry.
Figures of public interest. My favorite is I love that she brought the other girl into her mess. Now, I love when things get ugly. And you know what? Like you were saying earlier, you know what? I saw you looking at her 6 weeks ago at Bri at Craig's house, and I knew
it reminds me of that. Remember that lift situation with Beyonce and Jay-Z and Beyonce's sister?
Yes. Yeah.
And then they started. There was a big fist fight with Jay-Z and what's the sister's name? Solange.
Yeah.
Solange and Jay-Z started like going at each other. Well, she started hitting him and calling him names. It was all captured on footage, on video footage for us. I'm always like, sure, you know, God bless the internet for all the things that it's given us, but God damn the internet for the way that it's made everybody's private life public. And of course, if you choose to put that stuff out, you have no one to blame but yourself. But
I feel that much for them. I feel zero is, you know what, if you want the joys of what it gave you to be a public couple, you must be willing to take the downside. A responsibility in life, please. As much as, you know, it's terrible for the kids and the family, blah, 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 but you brought it on yourself. You're grown adults, and quite frankly, all the best. I want to know, I'm going to Google other people.
Really, it's all the best.
All the best. You brought it on yourself. I feel nothing for them. But I care about who's the other girl now, because I want to know, is she more beautiful than Leanne? Why is she in the picture? Where did they meet her?
Guess what every person, well, certainly every guy did after that, is he went and he Googled this girl.
Yes.
Emily Kark, Kark. Every guy, including me, and Googled her. And then you're like comparing them side by side. And you're like,
that's the sort of stuff. Let's get to the bottom of this.
I'm not proud of it, but that's what I did. Sorry. What can I tell you? All right, it's time for Blind History. We've got an extra long version of the final episode of Blind History for this morning. It is about royals behaving badly, so not just celebrities, but actual people who had power and prestige back in the medieval era or even before that, and in the case of one of them, quite recently. So these are people who really let the side down in terms of monarchy. And Mbulelo, you're not a big fan of monarchy anyway. So you reckon most of the time these monarchs are designed to let the side down because, you know, pure inheritance of something doesn't mean you're qualified in any way for it. Just because you inherited it doesn't mean you're any good.
Waking up is not an achievement. The hardest thing any royal will ever do is waking up, and it's sickening to my stomach.
Well, these guys prove your case, so you're going to love this episode. So here it is, an episode of Blind History, and this one really has to do with the men and women who might have been better suited to obscurity. Frankly, you know, they really just they're losers. That's the only way to explain. And Donald Trump would like that description. These are losers. So you listen to this and you tell us what you think. Blind History, the final episode of an incredible season. And a big thank you to everybody who's, you know, Dory and Spike, who work so hard on this behind the scenes. There's a whole team of people at Taylor Blinds and Shutters, from Anthony and Kate right the way to the people who edit the videos and everybody else. It's just an incredible thing to do and to be a part of. And thank you for listening to it and for subscribing to Blind History, because that keeps us in business. If you like it, you'll be pleased to know that there is a season 6 in the works, and we'll bring you more information about that later on this year. But here it is, Blind History Season 5, the final episode, and it's all about the bad kings and queens. Locked in towers, losing their minds or leading lives of absolute misery. These aren't the tales of medieval peasants victimized by the high and mighty. These are the high and mighty. Sometimes those who wear the crown are regal, strong, and ideal. Sometimes They're just awful people. Here are the stories of 6 kings and queens who became legends for the wrong reasons. Blind history. We always end the season with something either grisly or something you didn't expect. And this is going to be an interesting little trip through some of the worst kings and queens in history. And some of them are not the worst because they were particularly evil people. Some of them are just the worst because they didn't do a good job of being king or queen. And Anthony Meadera, my co-host, is ready. I'm ready to give you a little rundown of some of the worst people to ever wear crowns.
Well, I also love doing this and researching this. Although having said that, I think we've done quite a good job over the last 5 seasons of talking about some really, really bad individuals that easily would have made this list, but we've covered them already.
Well, one of the people we haven't looked at yet, and it was actually a suggestion that was made by somebody who listens to the show, they said you've got to look at Queen Ranavalona of Madagascar. First of all, I didn't know who the hell this was. I'd never heard of her in my life. And if you know her real name, it's Raboduandriana Poinomerina. I kid you not, that's how long her real name was when she was born in 1778. They called her the female Caligula, and maybe to start, I'm going to read this passage from a book about her. The 7 Christians stood together in the bright sunlight, bound with ropes, singing a hymn to their foreign savior as the spearmen advanced. Around them, a crowd of jostling men, women, and children, more than 60,000 strong, cheered enthusiastically as the spears were driven home, and one by one the men and women fell and writhed on the sandy ground, their hymn fading slowly into silence. Above the still writhing bodies on a ridge, a score of crosses stood in mute witness, carrying their ghastly burdens, some of whom still lived despite the day and a half they had hung upon the wood. That is what she did to Christians. So you can imagine what she did to people she really didn't like.
Bloodthirsty tyrant. They called her Ranavalona the Cruel.
Yes, she wasn't meant to be queen in the first place. Her father made a good call and heard about a plot against the then king of Madagascar, and he informed the king, and the king took action against his uncle, who was the plotter. And as a reward, the king said, well, I'll adopt your daughter, Ranavalona, and she can be queen after me.
Yeah, so he pledged his son, the young Prince Radama, who ended up also being quite a chop, to the little Ranavalona at the time.
Despite all of the nastiness, and she really did become very nasty with the colonial powers and with Christians in general, she tried to cut Madagascar off completely from the outside world. She waged war against anyone who came close, including the French and the British. She managed to repel quite effectively. She had scorched earth policies, which rendered all the other tribes that didn't comply with her rules hungry and starving and desperate. She managed also to wipe out any enemies within the court that she didn't like the look of. And there was constant plotting going on. She was pretty much evil from day one.
Look, she was massively jealous of her husband because he was running around. After 20 years, they didn't produce any heirs.
Yeah.
So I can just give you insight into how happy their marriage was. But he died, and the real craziness sort of came out, keeping his body, touring with his body.
Yeah.
Some weird stuff started with that.
Well, it's believed that she organized a bison hunt in Madagascar, and that this bison hunt went on for months and months, and that no bison were actually caught or killed. Buffalo, bison, whatever you want to call them, because I don't think bison actually exist in Madagascar, but that's what they called it. And she essentially had workers, some 10,000 of them died in the process, make a road all the way through the most difficult terrain in the island, just so she could follow in a comfortable carriage, so she could watch this bison hunt.
Her dead husband's rotting body with her.
Very odd behavior at very least. They say that she could have possibly taken out 1/2 of Madagascar's entire population through murder, starvation, or by just working them to death.
She became later on in life quite creative in her punishments, and I think it was against the culture to actually spill blood. So that meant she had to get creative, and instead of using swords, she had a victim starved or strangled or stretched.
Yeah, stretched. I mean, that's got to be right up there with the horrible things that people can do to each other. She had a very debauched and happy life for herself, though. She lived in complete luxury, had a palace built, she had the finest silks brought in, she wore outrageous outfits. So she made sure that she was comfortable, even if her people were miserable as all hell. And she did build factories. She started a production line in Madagascar that was enviable. She really made the whole country get to work, and she made a fortune out of doing that, selling it to Europe, selling it to the East, wherever anyone would buy. And eventually the governments of Reunion and Mauritius actually made an offer of paying her off so that she would let the colonials trade with her again. So she not only gained the trade through all the factories that she'd built, but she also got paid a handsome sum just for allowing them the privilege of docking in her harbors.
Definitely not consistent. And she really acted like a lunatic most of her life. Just before she died, she brought back a Christian tradition that, as bizarre as it sounds, a suspect would eat a toxic nut and some chicken skin.
Yes.
And then depending on the number of chicken pieces they vomited up, they were guilty or innocent. So
a lovely woman. Well, when she died, 12,000 zebu were slaughtered. You ask what a zebu is. It's a kind of cattle that they have in Madagascar. Their meat was distributed to the populace in her honor, and an official mourning period that lasted 9 months was carried out. Her body was put in a coffin made of silver in a tomb in the royal city of Ambohimanga. And during her funeral, a spark accidentally ignited a barrel of gunpowder, which was destined for use in the ceremony, which caused an explosion and a fire that killed a number of bystanders and destroyed 3 historic royal residences. 3. So, right to the end, she was full of vim and vigor. All right, that's Queen Ranavalona. Now we'll look at a different queen. This story is actually pretty sad, and a lot of people regard her as having been a bit of a martyr. That's certainly how she would have liked to have been seen. But Mary, Queen of Scots, how did you feel when you came to hear her whole story?
So, there's always been quite a lot of media about her, and there's been shows that you can watch, great books. And the thing, though, is it very much depends on what you digest in terms of historical evidence. Mm-hmm. It's very divisive. But myself personally, when we read the story, I just feel it's quite a tragic story. Besides the time that she spent, early life in France, the rest of her life was just shit.
It was miserable.
Yeah, it was absolutely miserable.
Another way to say it. If you were Scottish, you'd say, well, she had a shite life, she did.
Exactly.
Now, Mary, Queen of Scots took over as queen at the age of 6 days. And a child on the throne in the 1500s was never a good place to be. I mean, she had to be put in Linlithgow Palace for her own safety. She was married off very, very quickly to the French prince, who was eventually to become King of France. But that didn't last very long, because he died and she was left without him and without an heir, and was then told that she had to go back to Scotland. So she got on a ship, went off to Scotland, and while she thought her troubles were behind her, she was then married off to her own half-cousin, Henry Stuart Lord Darnley, who was a bit of a nutcase as well. He was an abusive and an aggressive man, and he accused her of having an affair with her secretary and then stabbed her secretary to death in front of her.
It was nice and stable in France when she was in King Henry II's court. She had an incredible time. But then he did die young, the boy prince, and she was just left stranded because she had nobody really to support her. And this is what happened with Mary Lot. She fell deeply in love with these people.
Yeah.
But they couldn't care less. All they were after was her titles and whatever she could give them. And Darnell was a real piece of work.
He was a terrible person. So Lord Darnley, as I mentioned, stabbed her supposed lover. She was never actually accused properly of it. He was just a jealous nutcase. And so she had him taken out in return. Well, they say she might have had a hand in it, but she didn't seem to be a very aggressive and nasty person, even at the worst of times. But then, to make things worse, she was abducted and possibly raped by the Earl of Bothwell, who wanted to make her his wife.
But this is where she was her own worst enemy. This Bothwell dude, she ended up marrying him.
She managed to get out of his clutches eventually. And then her life just got even more horrible because she tried to escape by going to England and right into the arms of her other cousin, Elizabeth I, who we've covered in another episode. And Elizabeth I would have none of her because she was an enemy and she was a threat to Elizabeth's kingdom. Of course, Elizabeth had no heirs, and Mary was likely to be the most senior heir. So Elizabeth made an order that she was guilty of treason and had her sentenced to death.
Before she went to England, I think she was locked up for a year in Scotland.
And then eventually another 20 in England.
Correct.
Elizabeth I did see her as a threat, right? And when she sentenced her, it was very hard for her because it was her cousin, and she actually didn't have a personal problem with Mary.
Well, it took Elizabeth, in fairness to her, 20 years to sign the letter to say, look, we're going to kill you. And by then, Mary was obese. She's suffering from a lot of illnesses because she'd been stuck in what they would call captivity, but she had 5 castles to go to. She could ride and hunt. She had 25 people looking after her. So she wasn't struggling, but obviously she was still a prisoner.
Yeah, look, it wasn't pretty towards the end, and her execution has got to be the worst part of the story. So let me get to that, because this is the grisly stuff people love. Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed in Fotheringay Castle, and she became an idol to English Catholics, so Elizabeth had to make the decision. Mary saw herself as a bit of a martyr, and as she faced the block, she dressed all in black, and underneath it she had this bright red dress, because red was the color of martyrs, right? So as she got up onto the scaffold, she took off her black dress, and there was this bright red dress underneath. She had her hair tied up. They thought it was her hair, and I'll get to that in a second. And she knelt down, and the executioner said, "Forgive me." And she said to him, "I forgive you and all the world with all my heart, for I hope this death will make an end to all my troubles." So she gets down on the block, and she reaches out, grabbing it. She goes, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." All this in Latin. The executioner raises his axe, and to his horror, he misses, and he grazes her head. And all she says is, "Sweet Jesus," and the axe goes up again. This time, it goes about 3/4 of the way through her neck.
Shame.
But not the whole way. Angry and exasperated, the executioner saws through the remaining part, like you would if you were gutting a fish.
Yeah, and there was a sinew left or something still.
It's horrible. And the body fell on its back bleeding. And as they did in those times, they lift up the head and they say, "God save the Queen," right? But they didn't realize she had a wig on. So as they lift the head rolls out from the wig. The guy's holding up just the wig, and the head rolls down the stairs.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Just absolutely appalling.
What an end to what it was a very difficult life.
What a horrible story.
But then Ivan is not tragic. He was just terrible.
The name surely tells you everything you need to know. Where does this story start?
So Ivan's dad was what they call Prince of Moscow. He died very young, I think when Ivan was about 3 years old. Then also his mom died at the age of 8. So he was basically left to nobles. And this obviously made a big difference in his life, this experience when he was young. He was basically treated like a homeless person. They didn't feed him and his brother. They didn't give them proper clothes. And it was all a big power struggle between 2 noble families to try to take advantage of this. And so his childhood was terrible. And I think also that from that point on, he really mistrusted the nobility, which would actually turn into blind hatred later on. And he took his anger out on animals when he was young. So he started pulling feathers out of live birds, throwing dogs and cats out of windows. So, a little bit of Vlad the Impaler, who used to spike rats.
Yeah.
So I think he also suffered from the same problems.
Yeah, I mean, look, he only earned his nickname later on, but he was a problem child. I mean, that's the one thing you could say from the start.
Yeah.
He's been called the Cersei Lannister of Russia. I mean, that's if you're a Game of Thrones fan, then you probably can draw the distinction quite quickly. Didn't really have a huge amount of love for his people once he became king.
No, definitely not. But when he was 13, he showed his teeth, and he arrested one of the most powerful nobles that was causing all the grief. And then he had hunting dogs tear him apart to make sure that this guy was dead, yes. And then a couple of years later, he took over as the Tsar.
Yeah, which obviously was a great time for Russians. They were thrilled, right?
Yeah, 100%. Look, in the beginning, actually in the early years, he was quite good. He married Anastasia, who was the start of the Romanov line, so the last Russian royal family that were actually murdered. So there was a lot of things he did administratively that was very good in the beginning, but he allegedly also had an architect blinded after he had built the St. Basil's Cathedral, just so that he wouldn't be able to produce anything else in his life.
Well, his wife that you mentioned, Anastasia, seems to have had a bit of a calming effect on him in the beginning. Some people say that she was the real power behind the throne. I don't know if that's true or not, but he lost 2 children with her in the beginning, and then they had a third child, which they called Ivan Ivanovich. Quite a lot of ego involved in that name. And they were very protective of this child. You know, even being around the kid could get you into trouble, let alone being the kid. But Ivan Ivanovich met the most brutal end of all, didn't he?
Oh, yes, when his dad killed him.
Nice.
Yeah, that was very nice. So the story goes that Ivan Ivanovich's wife, Ivan's daughter-in-law, was heavily pregnant at the time, and Ivan was very particular in the way you dressed, and he felt she dressed very sluttily. So he started beating her up, and she miscarried. So then his son got very upset and confronted his dad, and his dad killed him.
He also lost his wife, didn't he?
Anastasia died quite young. There's some rumors that she was poisoned. He was devastated. He went into a massive depression, and he was going to abdicate because also one of his great friends left Russia and joined the Lithuanians, and then actually put together an army and beat the living daylights out of Russia in battle. So then he said he's had enough. So he left Moscow and went north. And I think this is where it really started to unravel, because the nobles and clergy started to run Moscow, but they couldn't. They really struggled. There was war and civil war. So they asked him to come back at any terms. And then he said, okay, I'm coming back, but these are my terms. And the terms were to eliminate anybody or anything that resisted or looked like were against him.
Now, to make all of this worse, there was war on the go. He was constantly at war in the Baltic. There was hunger. There was huge starvation across Russia. I mean, it's not a great place to try and grow food in the first place. But the siege of Novgorod was another big, ugly part of that story. And he just seems to have gone from one crisis to the next, poisoning wives, killing his own kids. It's just horrible.
And also, he brought in the secret police, which was really a band of thugs, to carry out all the orders of anybody that was against him. They used to ride around on horses with dogs' heads latched onto their saddles.
They threw people into rivers, apparently. And then what would happen is if you managed to survive, once they'd thrown you into the ice-cold river, then they would come past in boats, and they would have hooks and spears and push you back under.
It's just terrible. They would boil, impale, roast anybody who was suspected or disloyal.
He did do one nice thing, and if you ever go to Moscow, you can see St. Basil's Cathedral, which is beautiful. It's probably one of the most iconic buildings in the world. So he's not a complete monster. He did commission one or two beautiful things, right?
Well, that architect was blinded. So I'm not 100% sure. And, he got architects also to commission specially constructed frying pans so that they could fry all the clergy, the women and children. Warmongering, brutalizing of his own population, attack on the clergy, nobility and the middle class, torturing and executing of anyone he felt was against him, raiding the nation's wealth. And it basically brought the economy to its knees.
And let's just say at the end of this story, it's not as if it ended well either. His bones were dug up in 1963, and they figured out that at the time of his death, he suffered from debilitating bone diseases that would have left him in constant pain, barely able to move. They found mercury in his body, which came from the ointments he used to try and ease his agonizing joints. So he died in huge discomfort.
Yeah, I think he also had a stroke or something when he was playing chess.
What a horrible story. Ivan the Terrible. So if you think that's terrible, we've still got 3 more to tell you about. The first one of those is King John. Now, King John is probably known as the most stupid and useless and inept king of England. He did a number of stupid things, and we'll start off with the story that John was never really meant to be king. I mean, he was about the 5th or 6th child of King Henry II. All his older brothers were better suited to the role. There was King Henry the heir, who was meant to take over. He was killed in a ship that wrecked off the coast of England. There was Richard I, who went on the Crusades, who was apparently handsome and brave and courageous and managed to defeat Saladin and all that kind of thing. He had a brother called Geoffrey, who also died before him. John was right at the end of the queue. He was never meant to be king, but he was a real cunning, sly, surreptitious, dangerous little man. And I think because he was the last born, he probably thought quietly on his own all the way through his life of ways to unseat his brothers from power.
out of all the kids, his dad loved him the most. But like you rightly said, he was right at the back of the queue. And I think in the end, he was actually quite weak-willed.
Well, I mean, it's a famous part of the story that's told in all the Robin Hood classics that John was the one who refused to pay a ransom to get his brother back as King of England when he was captured on his way back from the Crusades. And John saw it as an opportunity. So he said, nah, bugger him, let him stay in the castle. We won't need to raise taxes here in England to pay for Richard's freedom. I'll rather take the taxes for myself.
Yeah, 100% correct. He tried to take Richard I's throne while he was away. So he was definitely not heroic, and he interfered in a lot. He was a strange sort.
Yeah, he lost the crown jewels once he did become king, and that'll forever stain his reputation. He was crossing an area called the Wash, which is on the northern coast of East Anglia. And the waves came, and he thought, well, like Canute many years before, I can command the waves, I'm a king. And he ended up losing all the crown jewels, the crown, the scepter, the orb, all the things that were important that had been in the royal treasury from the time of William the Conqueror. He lost it all. He also impoverished the country, not only by paying huge sums over losing Normandy to the French, so they lost their possessions in France. He was called Lackland because he was the first king of England who didn't have any land outside of England.
Yeah, and he was cruel, sexually deviant.
Deviant.
He was also forced into a humiliating climb down with nobility. So that's the famous Magna Carta, and excommunicated from the church at some stage. So he had a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I'd say that that's putting it mildly. So the Magna Carta is famously a document which is supposedly the beginning of constitutional monarchy, but it was effectively a way for the nobles to keep him in check because he just spent all the money, made stupid rules, didn't listen to anyone, and was ungovernable, and ran the country into ruin. So he was not a popular king, and when he died, he was buried in a cathedral where no one else is really buried. He's the only king in there, and his tomb has been undisturbed, surprisingly, since he died, but he's really not regarded as being anything that we should be proud of if we're English. And although his son Henry III eventually took over after his death and was a very pious, noble man who extended Westminster Abbey and, prayed at the shrine of King Edward the Confessor, King John is regarded as one of the wickedest and worst. And there are no other Johns, you'll notice. There was only King John I.
That's true.
John II, John III. England had decided they had quite enough of the name John.
So what Winston Churchill mentioned was, and this is exactly verbatim, when the long tally is added, it will be seen that the British nation and the English-speaking world owe far more to the vices of John than to the labors of virtuous sovereigns, for it was through the union of many forces against him that the most famous milestones of our rights and freedom was in fact set up.
They've still got a copy of the Magna Carta, which is preserved, and it is regarded as the beginning of any kind of constitution, any kind of human rights bill, and it gave people the right to challenge absolute authority. So in some ways, maybe Churchill's correct. John was a blessing in disguise, but a hell of a horrible blessing in a very bad disguise. So we go from King John, ignominiously, to Pope John, but this is Pope John the 12th. He was Pope in the year 930. Now that's a long time ago. This is in the middle of the Dark Ages, so a lot of stuff is a bit sketchy around the papacy at this time.
Well, if you can call it the papacy the way he carried on.
Yeah, look, so this guy is supposed to have been the worst pope in history, and there are a number of reasons they say that. He was depraved. He was obsessed with material things. He behaved exactly in the opposite way that you would expect a pope to behave. And he had arguments with everybody. He fell out with Otto, the Holy Roman Emperor. He was unable to control Rome. He was just a mess.
Correct. I think what might have made you shiver, Gareth, is that his name was actually Octavian.
Yes.
And that's one of your favorite Roman emperors, and probably the greatest Roman emperor's name, actually.
Yeah. Well, we don't even know really about his birth, because he was the son of Alberic II, who was, sort of a secular ruler of the Papal States. His mother was just a mistress of Alberic's, who was also his stepsister. So this is very incestuous from the beginning. Not great.
He really loved drinking, fornicating, hunting, gambling. And he even once named a 10-year-old boy a bishop basically showing his contempt for the papacy.
Listen, he was made Pope at what, 18 years old?
Yeah, exactly. At that particular year, he waged war and lost everything.
Well, right from the start, they could tell that this guy's character was not suited to the papacy because he was devoted to hunting, hawking, gambling, and wine.
Correct. And then St. Peter's Cathedral was turned into a whorehouse.
Now, when you say that, are you being figurative or literal?
Literal.
So he just brought women in and there would be orgies.
He would obviously get bored of some of the ladies. So he liked to have different ones all the time. And it just...
Variety.
Yeah, and it was very hard for him to go out to all different places. So he just brought them all to St. Peter's. And, if anybody's been there, you just cast your mind to that being a whorehouse. It just doesn't make any sense.
I mean, when it came to actually being Pope, he threatened to excommunicate anybody who gave him any trouble. He eventually took on Otto, that was the Holy Roman Emperor, and Otto eventually would have him replaced with someone else. But he sent a bishop to negotiate with him. And while that was being resolved, John was busy having like a multiple group sex experience with like 5 or 6 women.
Yeah, correct. And then when he heard Otto's coming, he ran away. So he was a great man. Such depth of character.
He wasn't around for very long, right? He either died at the age of 27 or 34, depending on which sources you have. And his his life is not particularly noteworthy other than the scandals. But the guy was not very attached to the idea of being a priest or of being the Pope. He didn't even read the Bible very much.
If you can just imagine 937, and people were extremely religious. Anybody that did something like enjoying young men, it would be absolutely, it's almost like talking to the devil in those days. And he enjoyed young men who hung like mules. That's basically what they said.
So it was young men who were hung like mules and many, many women. So he was
correct.
He was not discriminating.
No, not at all.
Apparently, also, they can't figure out how he died. Some people say he had a stroke while he was busy having sex. Some other people say he was killed by a woman's husband who was jealous of him. We can't really figure out which one is true. But either way, the Catholic Church kind of, we think they have scandals these days, and they really do. But this guy was probably the role model that shouldn't have happened. Of course, there's lots of other stories about all the immoral things that he did, how he was angry and aggressive and ready to fight with just about anyone. He didn't like doing anything that revolved around ceremony or prayer or worship or anything else. He was probably on a par with the Roman Emperor Elagabalus. Do you remember him?
Yes. Also slept with his sisters and niece.
Correct. A robber, a murderer, an incestuous tyrant, that kind of thing.
And he wasn't too concerned about, what God would say, because he would say that he could worry about that later, in the confessions. And he also used to ask Jupiter or Venus to give him luck when he was gambling, and often toast Satan when he was drinking. So
that's exactly the opposite of what you'd want a priest to be. And,
exactly, yeah, 100%.
And Ferdinand Gregorovius, who was a writer at the time, said he saw it as almost a split personality. There was Octavian, and then there was John the 12th. And John the 12th was supposed to be this pope who did the right thing. But Octavian, the real person, was at a very immature age, prone to huge desire and to fulfilling his own whims. And if he'd been a prince, it wouldn't have been necessarily so horribly judged. But because he was a pope, it didn't go down well. And the Catholic Church have tried very hard to hide the story of John the 12th ever since.
Yeah, look, I think being a prince, you can do anything. And that most princes did these type of things, but not as a pope.
So in other words, what we've learned in the last 2 stories is don't call your child John if you want them to take over a country or the papacy.
Correct.
So from John to Juana, and Juana is just basically Joanna, which is the female version of John in Spanish. And Juana of Castile this is a very sad story. I mean, this poor woman, she's called Joanna the Mad. She was also, in some ways, like Mary Queen of Scots, she was a pawn that was moved around between the powerful men in her life. The men who she loved, her own father, her own husband, her own son. She was treated so badly by all of them.
It is a tragic story. And her parents were powerhouses. Isabel
and Ferdinand of Aragon. So they were actually the power couple who launched Christopher Columbus, She also, Isabella, she was the one who started the Inquisition.
Yes, the Spanish Inquisition, correct.
Which is a horrible, horrible thing. She was a religious nut, but it was a real worry to her mother right to the end of her life that Juana was going to end up being an atheist and that she wouldn't be a good Catholic Inquisition Christian like she was.
She was a rebel. She wasn't very pious, and her mom hated that. So her mom actually tortured her a little bit. She stretched her.
Yeah, well, let's get into the detail of this, because she wasn't necessarily religious, but I don't think she was an atheist. And they called her a heretic because her mom was, a religious lunatic. And what they did is they hung her up on ropes tied to her hands, and they tied weights to her feet to stretch her.
Yeah.
Horrible.
I think she was quite tall in the end after that. But she was very, very well educated in music, literature, and philosophy, even in law for that matter. So she was definitely well prepped to be a wise consort. And she was married off to Philip of Flanders.
Philip the Handsome.
Yeah, so she wasn't too upset about that, but he ended up not being so Prince Charming. He was all over the place.
Yeah, well, they produced a couple of children.
So basically, she was pregnant the whole time, and then he just kept jumping over the wall. And then she went into jealous rages and depressive tailspins. And I think this also started a reputation of insanity, because she started indulging in love potions and witchcraft and snake oils to maybe pique his interest.
Listen, I think it's very unfair that we call her Juana the Mad, because really most of that is probably stuff that he was gathering on her while they were married unhappily. But there was a great story about how she once burst into his room and she found him with another woman, and she took a pair of scissors and she started cutting this woman's hair and she started slashing her face with the scissors. So she might have been mad.
Yeah, I think she was just a bit agitated. But her brother died at 18 years old. So then she actually moved closer into the line of the throne. And then old Philip the Handsome thought, wow, this is it. So he started prancing around, calling himself by her brother's title, which was the Prince of Aragon, even before her brother's body was cold. So these guys are just something else.
So the relationship for them ends where he dies. He never became Holy Roman Emperor. Their son would eventually become Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. But when he died, she really started to behave strangely. She had an obsession with his dead body. She would only travel at night because she was scared that women would see him or see his casket and fall in love with him because he was so pretty. So she actually traveled at night. She kept kissing and caressing his dead body. It took about a week for them to get to Granada, where they were going to bury him. And her behavior from the moment where he died until the moment he was eventually put into the ground was very, very odd.
Yes, and then just after that, her dad had her locked up and seized control of Castile. So just when one idiot died, then the next one stood up. So that's what's tragic.
So the husband treated her badly. The dad locked her up in jail, only visited her twice in 11 years, which is pretty awful for a father.
Yeah. And then her son was crueler than anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, her son, Charles V, kept her locked up. He thought, nah, not worth letting the old lady out. Let's keep her in there for another couple of years.
Yeah, and then she just became more and more eccentric, completely hidden away from society.
And that's where the reputation of the mad really seems to come from, because when people don't know what's going on, they make up stories. They made stories up about how she'd brought animals into her room, about how she couldn't stop talking all the time. She would mutter incoherently to herself.
Yeah, talking in tongues.
She was very lonely. And one of the cruelest things that her son did in imprisoning her is he also took away her youngest daughter and married her off. So she didn't even have a daughter to keep her company.
And also her sister, Catherine, was married to Henry VIII. And she also had a very tragic life.
Of course, you've referred in a previous episode to the Habsburgs, but it's because of her that the Spanish and Austrian lines of Habsburgs were eventually joined. And that's also where a lot of the inbreeding came from. So she may have made a huge contribution, but there was possibly also inherited madness before she came along. And then obviously after her, there was plenty of madness to go around.
Yeah, and I think if you look at Isabel, she was over the edge on the religious side.
Yeah.
And Ferdinand, you can see his personality. So, there's a good chance that she inherited something there.
Well, I'll tell you what her children inherited was more power than any other family in history, probably, because Eleanor married the King of Portugal and then the King of France. Charles became Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire and married Isabella of Portugal. Then Isabella, the third daughter, married the King of Denmark. Ferdinand married Anne of Bohemia and Hungary and had children. Mary married Louis of Hungary and Bohemia. You can again see that there's a lot of intermarriage going on here.
Yeah.
And Catherine, the youngest, married another king of Portugal. There wasn't one of her children who wasn't a king, a queen, or an emperor.
Incredible.
No, but shame. Very unfortunate woman. Had a very sad life. She was eventually buried next to her beloved husband, Philip the Handsome. But that kind of was the end of a very sad and depraved existence.
Exactly.
Poor woman. We'll end it on her, and I hope we haven't depressed you. Well, this is the last episode of Season 5 of Blind History. I can't believe we've done 5 seasons of this already, Ant.
Sure, it's been incredible. I've absolutely loved. From Alexander the Great, I believe, was our first episode 1 of Season 1 to the Royals behaving badly today. It's been a wild ride and it's been fantastic.
Well, we're not finished and there are plans afoot to get some other things going soon. So stick around and thank you for being a supporter of Blind History. And well done to all of the team at Cliff Central and at Taylor Blinds and Shutters for putting together some amazing, amazing content. Stuff that Anthony and I just love. We do it because we love it, but everybody else is putting in hard work as well. And it really is so much fun to do something that sounds and feels as good as this. Blind History is brought to you by Taylor Blinds and Shutters. All the episodes are available on the cliffcentral.com website and app, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Every single member of the royal family since Elizabeth I is a direct descendant of Mary, Queen of Scots. And in some ways, that family tree kind of throttled around her, because if she hadn't had kids, it would have gone to much more distant relatives. So in some ways, she kept the blood flowing through the royal family. And our current queen in England has quite a lot to thank Mary, Queen of Scots for.